Hello audience, I hope that you're fine. We are here to talk about Fathers of Nations. Previously we have just been talking about chapters and the summaries, although we had a situation where I was piloting among students to see what they have, the ideas they have on Fathers of Nations. Now today I'm talking about chapter 5 and I normally name it Rebirth. I hope you understand why. And I'm just going to talk about the thematic concerns. I may talk about styles and the character and characterization if time allows me. Now, when I look at this chapter, I see the first theme being separation. Why do I see separation in this chapter? There is a distance majorly that separates Pamela from the father. Pamela comes from Boston and she was married to Afolabi when they were in the university. Now, when you look at Dr. Afolabi and Pamela, there is separation too. Now, I'll begin with Pamela's situation. Pamela's father lives in Boston, and it has been 6 years since Pamela stayed with the father. It is only through the meeting that Dr. Afolabi now goes to Boston that Pamela gets a chance to visit the father. Pamela has stayed without meeting her father, and she's so excited that the meeting will allow her to visit the father in Boston. When we look at the chapter, we actually realize the father has also really missed the presence of the daughter. And that is why we see him living as a widow and having somebody just to help him move around. The journey to Boston becomes a godsend provision for Pamela to meet the father. Look at page 66 for more information. We have another situation of separation when we have Dr. Afolabi traveling back to Nigeria. And this is when you're traveling, most times when you're traveling and you've left with somebody from a house or you are coming back with somebody, then you expect you'd sit together, of course. When you're booking, the numbers are given based on that. Now, what do we see in Fathers of Nations in this chapter? We realize that on traveling back to Nigeria from Boston, the wife, Pamela, is separated with Dr. Afolabi. The seats can no longer be what they had while they were going away. Mr. Longway interferes the arrangements, and he sits next to Afolabi in a separate class with Pamela. The whole of the journey, they do not have any contact because of Mr. Longway. If you look at page 70 to 74, you can get more ideas on this situation. The third separation comes on arrival in Nigeria. What do we see? Pamela is surprised to find a lady in the house. And what is her reaction? You know what whites can do. She says she cannot stand it, especially when she's speaking and she realizes there is a possibility Dr. Afolabi knew the arrangements, and he's trying to defend the lady and say she should just sleep until morning. She cannot leave in the night. What does Pamela do? She decides to leave and go to Boston. We are not actually told the details about where she goes, but that is our assumption here. Now, if you check on page 81, you will see more information on this separation. So if you get any other separation within chapter 5, you're welcome to add. Now, the second theme that we find in this chapter is change. What is change? Change is the transformation that we get. Maybe it can be physical or any other form. Now, within this act, Dr. Afolabi travels to Boston and realizes that the times in Boston have changed. There are more older people as compared to when he was at Harvard. This is shared on page 66. We also see that Dr. Afolabi is convinced by Longway while they are traveling during this switch of seats. And Dr. Afolabi is told that Path Alpha is the worse strategy than Way Omega, and that he should mentor the 4 travelers from Agda to take this position on Path Alpha. That can be seen on page 74. Remember, Dr. Afolabi was supporting Way Omega, but Longway convinces him, and in a way, just as we are ending this chapter, we realize that Dr. Afolabi might be joining us in Path Alpha. The next change that I realize in this chapter is when Dr. Folaby notices that in the old days, the old were being taken care of by the young. But now in the current society, what is happening? They are being taken to old people's homes. What a life. That is seen on page 66 up to page 67. Now, the third a theme that comes out in chapter 5 is alienation. Alienation is the process in which you feel you're not, associating yourself much to a given situation, culture, or even a family, Now, in chapter 4, what do we see? Dr. Afolabi notices that in the old days, the old were being taken care of by the young. But now, currently, they are being taken to old people's homes. That is because of alienation, like families no longer are together. Look at Pamela. She has been in Africa, Nigeria particularly, for over 6 years. So who will take care of her father? Possibly she's alienated from her father, and the father is alienated from her. That is page 66 to 67. Now, when we also look at Pamela, and when Pamela is made by Longway to relocate from the class she had booked with Dr. Folaby, she's a bit uncomfortable. She feels alienated, and that is page 70 to 72. You may have different ideas on this. You're welcome to share your views. We also have both Pamela and Dr. Folaby who have the ability to bear children. Look at that. What does Pamela decide? She wants them to adopt kids. We do not actually understand why she decided this. And so the folks in the family decide to keep demanding that these people should have their own children, or Dr. Folaby should marry another wife. So we realize that possibly Dr. Folaby is alienated. The Nigerian in him is not seen here. Page 80. The fourth theme that we come across is corruption and impunity. They are not two in one, but they are two in two. So Longway believes that the worst problems that face Africa include corruption, a crime that rewards the kickbacks and impunity, a crime, and he says that it helps in protecting criminals from punishment, page 72. When people practice a lot of corruption, what does it do? It makes human beings look more on aspects of money. They can protect themselves using money, and they don't care at all about what happens in the society. We also have tradition. Maybe we may refer to it as culture or with any other name, but that is what I call it. And when you look at the book, you see Femi is sent by Dr. Afolaby, Folaby's folks, back at home. They send him to bring this lady to the house so that he marries, Dr. Folaby marries a second wife, since Pamela is not bearing her own children as they would wish. Now, they intend to have her bear for him children, as shown on page 78. This is culture. Now, Femi is asked questions by Pamela all the time, if we look in this chapter, and ironically, he does not respond. What does he say? He says the woman should shut up. He wants to talk to Dr. Folaby. It's out of culture, like male chauvinism. It's part of culture in African societies, and that is shown on page 77. We also see Femi telling Dr. Folaby to tell his wife what kind of a brave fighter he is. Looking at the context of Dr. Folaby and Pamela, you understand this comes out as culture, because Pamela does not really value what Femi says here. Then we have the aspect of opportunism. Where do we see opportunism in Act 5? Longway believes that Path Alpha will bring change in the society that is prone to corruption and impunity, that there will be no coups, that there will be will for change, as he shares that on page 72 when they are in the plane. We also meet loneliness. Where do we see this? As I said earlier, Pamela's father had been staying alone in the old people's home for 6 years. So you can imagine he was quite lonely. And that is why when he was in the vehicle, when he came to the supermarket, he was talking so much to the supermarket lady. He was showing around whatever he has. He did not come to buy anything. And Dr. Folaby felt that this old man is a bit lonely. Pamela's father, therefore, in the departmental store, remember, he chats a lot with the girl, page 67 to 68, I mean. Now, Afolabi also thinks that the old people in America live a lonely life because they are far from relatives. You know, sometimes, as far as we may say, we don't need relatives around, all that, but they make your life a bit bearable, and you are not as lonely as this old man is seen on page 67. We also encounter deceit. Pamela is tricked by the cranky passenger, whom we later come to learn as Tad in the economy passenger, to give away her seat to him. And remember, he was quite strategic. He knew why he was taking the seat of this lady on page 71. We have class stratification if we look in Act 5. And where do we see this? The traveling arrangements are made based on class. If you are able to pay for the economy class, the better. If you have the VIP, we also have the same. Now, Pamela and Dr. Folaby were in the economy class as shown on page 70 to 72. Now, that is just about character and characterization in Act 5. I'll have to go through character and characterization. I've just done the aspect of themes. Now, we look at Pamela. From what I've already shared, you can see that she's a bit caring. She cares for the father. She's only away from home, but that is why she insists to accompany Dr. Follett back to America so that she can meet the father on page 66. She is quite assertive. Why is she assertive? When she realizes that her room is occupied by somebody at home, she asks a lot of questions to Femi and demands for answers. And when Dr. Folaby cannot answer, she decides to leave. If she can't leave, then let me leave. And that is what we see in the text. We also see that she's a bit short-tempered and temperamental. Remember, it was quite at night, and that is why Dr. Folaby was saying that the lady cannot leave. But she says, I'll leave if she can't leave. It's out of anger, I believe. That is why she decided to do so and leave that night. We also see a lot of physical, shows that demonstrate her anger. She quarrels with Dr. Folaby over Nimbo. She's very angry on noticing that Afolaby is trying to have a second wife. And even though she's not quite sure, she believes that Dr. Folaby is in the picture. Page 78 shows us all that. She racks Dr. Afolaby's hand in an ambiguous rebuff when he is trying to cool her down. Now, she's also opportunistic. Why do we say so? She takes advantage of Dr. Folaby's journey to Boston to go and see the father. Because in this situation, she was not really the invited guest here. But she takes this to see the father. She's quite sensitive and suspicious. Why? Pamela suspects that there is something wrong with Issa. Because she gets into the house and Issa is grabbing her left hand with both his hands, and indeed, she finds the stranger in the house on page 75. Then she also thinks that her husband plans to marry because she does not have her own children. You know, she says that because she's a bit sensitive at that, and that he knows this lady and possibly the arrangements. That is what she says on page 80. She's observant. She's quite keen to observe that the husband is possibly having something to do with the girl who has been brought in the house. Then she is decisive and resolute. She makes her decision and that is it. Nobody can change her mind. When she decides to leave for Boston at night, nobody can change her mind, and she does so. She even later files a divorce with Dr. Folaby on page 81. She's quite inquisitive. Remember the time she got into the house? What did she ask? She says, Abiola, so you know him? Page 77. She again asks, and who are you? Page 76. And then she, a burglar? That is page 75. Later, is it a yes or not? That is page 77. She's quite authoritative, remember. She was commanding, you know, my commanding wife. You see, in this book, she reprimands Femi to show some respect to, and to answer her when she asks a question directly. She does not want answers to be given to Dr. Folaby when she asks them Look at page 77. She reprimands Dr. Folaby to tell Femi and the girl that they can't stay. And if they stay, she better get away. And that's what she does, page 80. Then we meet Dr. Folaby. How is Dr. Folaby? Dr. Folaby is a bit intelligent in this part because he has acquired education up to university level. And in a flashback, we get to know that he learned at Harvard University. That is page 66. He is quite open-minded. Why do we say that? When he talks to Mr. Longway in the plane for a while, he agrees to mentor the 4 travelers about from Agda so that the ensure path Alpha gets to the summit, and that is page 70 to 74. You can imagine you have a strategy you are going to support. Somebody just comes up with another idea, and yes, you say, oh, I may do it. Yeah, that is quite open-minded. Now, he's a bit secretive. He meets this old man, the father to Pamela, in the departmental store when he's buying some items, and he swears never to reveal that to Pamela. That is page 66. He is also informed, knowledgeable, and reliable. Why do we say that? Do you know why he was going for this meeting in Boston? He had been appointed to serve as an advisor of the Summit of the Heads of State, and the Foundation for Democratic Rule in Washington had also invited him to give a keynote, mark that, keynote address at the annual conference. That is page 66. During the conversation with Tad, it comes out clearly that he was conversant with Way Omega and what it can offer to Africa, page 70 to 74. We can also say he was observant. Why do we say he was observant? Dr. Folaby travels to Boston and quickly notices that there are some changes. Remember what I've said about when I was giving the themes, and I gave the theme of change, that the old people here are no longer being taken care of by young people, but they are being placed in old people's homes. That Harvard is no longer, Boston is no longer what it was when during his Harvard times. That requires an observant eye. He observes also that the lady in the departmental store is being tactful, and that is why she takes a while with the old man listening and all that, and then finally she tries to dismiss the old man. He sees the green-eyed man in a different light after talking to him for that long time. The green-eyed man, do you know who he is? That is Long Tadway, page 73. Now, he is apologetic. He apologizes to the girl at the store after making a foolish joke about whatever he had bought, page 69. Then he's a bit temperamental also. He seizes Isa's arm roughly and threatens to break it when he is not answering questions that Pamela is asking. Remember page 76? Yeah, that is just him for Dr. Afolabi. Then we have the Dr. Folaby as being loving, concerned, and caring. He says that Pamela is not the only, that Pamela is the only wife he wants, and he wraps his arm around her before the strangers. That is page 78. When Pamela is annoyed and irritated with the situation they find at home, he calms her by holding her on the shoulder, page 80. He also says that the strangers should not go away in the night. That is because he's caring, I guess, page 80. Then we have this Mr. Tad Longway in this chapter. We cannot forget about him. He's quite appreciative. He appreciates Dr. Folaby for a good address he gave at the summit, and he sees the value in him, page 71. He's also a schemer, or scheming rather, if we have to use adjectives as the situation asks to. He's aware that Dr. Folaby will attend the summit in Boston, and he tactfully switches seats, replacing Pamela, and talking to him about Path Alpha and what he should do to talk to these 4 travelers who will be there at the summit. That is page 70 to 74. You can confirm that if you read through the dialogue, the long dialogue that we see there. Then he's quite persuasive. Why do we say he's persuasive? Talking to somebody like Dr. Folaby Nigeria in him and making him convinced and deciding that, okay, I'll do something about the path alpha to the four travelers. It is some task, you know. That is page 70 to 74. He's also sociable. See how he relates easily with Dr. Folaby. That cannot require somebody who is not sociable. He's optimistic. He believes quite well that path alpha is the way to go. It is going to eliminate impunity, corruption, and all those sorts of things that Africa is encountering. You can check that on page 72 to 73. And then he's indulgent and idealistic. You know, somebody who has ideas, believes that way omega and path alpha, when you compare the two, there is a way out, you know. Now, Nimbo is just you know, a minor character. You can help me establish the character traits of Nimbo or Femi, and if time allows us next, before we really waste a lot, we will talk about the language and the stylistic devices here, because I don't want to tire you so much. I want you to put effort, help me understand and add more within this chapter, and that is why I have to stop there. Bye bye. See you next as we talk about the language and styles in this act, and maybe talk about chapter 6.